Well, thanks for joining today. My name is Jeremiah Johnson. I'm with Fortinet. I'm a manager for our cloud solutions engineering team. And we get to talk to customers a lot about different trends, breaches. Obviously, we work for a security company, so we're trying to solve the breaches and a lot of the common threats. What I've done is I've put together a deck to kind of go over these and tell you what we see. We're a global company, so we have a lot of reach. We do get to see a lot of different things. This isn't obviously a Fortinet pitch here. This is a general, topic for the community. But let's dive in. So first, I want to talk about the cybersecurity news and breaches, that are public, right? We all see them every day, and I think that it's becoming so common that the general public is almost finds it kind of funny. It's like, oh, I get free credit monitoring because so and so company got breached, and I think that we can do better if I'm being quite honest with you. So in 2024, if we look at through the numbers, it's 68% of the data breaches involved human errors. Not shocking, we know. Humans, unfortunately, are usually the weakest link. Whether an error was made in the configuration of the cloud, whether an error was made by clicking a bad link or something along those lines. Unfortunately, it doesn't involve our fellow friends a lot of times. So with a lot of the AI technology coming out, which I'm a huge fan of, I think it's great. I play with a lot of these different solutions out there as I hope people are staying familiar with them. The problem is, do you know who else uses those? Oh yeah, the people that want into your data, right? The people that we're trying to defend against. So, although AI has a lot of pertinent assistance programs and abilities to help us in the cloud security or general network security, we also have to worry about the bad people using that same technology. And then one of the challenges, though, is, and I'm not picking on them because I love all three of these folks, the CSPs. However, if cyber ratings went out, and if anybody's going to fact check me on this, there wasn't an updated one done last month on Google specifically. You're welcome to check that out. But for intents and purposes, I just kind of left it where it was. They still rank much higher than AWS and Azure in this aspect of testing. But the point is, the native protection in cloud really isn't doing enough for the security of your infrastructure. And specifically for the cloud, ins and outs, so to speak. So moving into kind of some of the different security news cycles, I should say. Um, these are public. It's not like there's anything hidden here, but the national public data one, I mean, that's a lot of people, and if that one most likely affected you, if not, if you didn't get a notification, you should probably check into that. My kids were affected by that. I've still not quite secured how, since one of them is 11 and one of them is 14. So I don't exactly know at what point their data was in the national public data, taxes, who knows, whatever. But it is concerning, right? That is a lot of people across the U.S. there that were more than likely compromised in some aspect. And so security number is the one we don't want out, right? Two, the AT&T one. This one to me is really concerning. If you look at what data was leaked, not only was it, phone numbers, encrypted passcodes, things like that, it's the location data. And that just feels invasive. Like somebody has, more data than what they need. They could track your movements. They could see, what time you drop your kids off to school, when you pick up your coffee. Again, just really invasive stuff. And then United Healthcare, that one again, that's bad. That's your health records. And again, that to me is very invasive. You don't, I mean, most people on social media are pretty free with with what they got going on in their health world, but a lot of us probably don't want that data out there, right? Maybe you have some, just some things you haven't shared with your family yet, and they get out online. That's just not good. And then Ticketmaster, 40 million. I believe that number actually like massively increased after this came out. I think it's actually more than that, but we'll leave it at 40 million to be nice. But again, payment data, not that it really matters if somebody found out you went to Taylor Swift, but at the same time, it does have a lot of your purchase history and credit history, things like that in there. So what are we seeing as the industry is kind of changing and what the challenges are specifically? So this comes from a report. If you're interested in reading more about this, happy to share it. But this kind of comes with some of the Gardner reports that they've put out, right? And I've talked to a lot of different companies, you know, large multi-billion dollar companies down to the $100 million, maybe more commercial companies. And what we're seeing is the industry-wide cybersecurity shortage is a thing, right? It's a big deal, and 95% of the people that were polled in this survey, are concerned about having qualified professionals, whether it's extremely down to moderately. The other five, I don't know what they're doing. This is kind of funny. I think maybe they have a really well-funded program. I have the opportunity to speak with youth a lot through different programs, and I try to make our industry as cool as it can be to get the younger generation moving into infosec, right, and cloud security specifically for me. Um, but what we're seeing is, again, the organizations that we're talking to or that we're polled, 70% of them actually have a gap right now. Whether maybe it's a budgetary issue, maybe they just can't get the talent that they need in there. But either way, they are experiencing some type of gap in their employment for cybersecurity. And what do those day-to-day challenges actually look like, right? So I believe last year, same similar report, misconfigurations were number one, and guess what those involve typically? Human element, right? So I always try to say, just because you have somebody that's amazing in AWS, maybe don't expect them to be your number one Google person, right? Because a lot of times concepts are similar, execution is different. So if you can spin up a server in AWS and have it up and running in a few seconds, just because you can do that in AWS doesn't mean you're as effective and efficient in Google, right? We all know that you can make a storage bucket or storage blob public within a few clicks. Even though it asks, sometimes we just make mistakes. Then again, that data, I think some of the breaches in 24 kind of offset this, right, and kind of push that data security and privacy as the number one challenge, right? They just want to make sure the companies aren't on the front page of the paper, right? That's a goal. And then the multi-cloud challenges, right? As I just mentioned, just because you're a rock star in AWS doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to log into OCI and spin up a database, right? I mean, you'll figure it out if you're smart, but you might not be able to do it as effectively and efficiently. And diving into those industry challenges for the multi-cloud, this is more of kind of a pitch as to all the different security challenges out there in multi-cloud. But again, I just want to drive home the fact that because you're in a different cloud, just be mindful of what you're asking the talent within the company to do, right? So there's different teams. I have a soft spot for development because the majority of the time development folks are focused on getting XYZ done, and security normally goes to the back of the bus, right? It's unfortunate, but that's just the rule of how development works. It's get this working, please, as quick as possible, and then we'll figure out security later. Obviously, shift left if you can, fix it in code. Um, right, and then the other thing with once you have live environments, when our confidence of real-time detection is 64% of those organizations are not confident that they're going to be able to stop the breaches. So that's a large percentage. If I deploy some firewalls, let's say on-prem, you have an in and an out, and a lot of times you just feel better about the way that security looks. In cloud, that changes drastically because you have multiple endpoints. You can change a route without really any kind of checking, right? You all of a sudden you put in a new internet gateway and you completely bypass your whole firewall system. So I know that that's where that confidence comes into play. And then the public cloud concerns specifically, those numbers are obviously higher because of that exact thing, right? And then moving into what just some specific cloud threats, these probably won't blow your mind, but your data breaches, right? That's number one. That's the one thing that people want. They can use that for financial gain. They can, extortion, all kinds of different things. Typically, if you have experienced malware ransomware, that's usually the bad folks covered up their tracks on the data breach. Is typically the rule of thumb. Now, occasionally, maybe they couldn't exfiltrate data and they're just trying to extort money and do a ransom. So, you can look it up in the news. There's quite a few health companies, hospitals that ransomware has shut pretty much the whole environment down to where they did pay, right? And then you get into some other legality things that I'm not qualified to really talk about, but anytime that you pay those, there's no guarantee. Now, I will say I have talked to some of the opposing teams, and they're really nice, right? They want to help you free up your locked computers and things like that, and get your data back as long as you're willing to pay the premium. And then that account hijacking, right? Those um, gaining unauthorized control. And here's one of the things that should be like top of mind. You should never use your top domain account for management, right? So whether it's in your CSP, AWS, Google, Oracle, Azure, uh, that top level domain should not be used, right? It's not that you're an admin and you shouldn't have access, but you should limit your access to actually what you need. Um, I happened to be at AWS's event this year in Vegas, and I believe the statistic they said within specific to AWS is 92% of all accounts are oversubscribed, meaning that people that log in day to day to manage that have way more access than what they actually need. So if that user becomes compromised, they have the keys to the kingdom effectively, right? So be mindful of that. Don't oversubscribe users. There's just not really a need for that. Those serverless attacks targeted on the serverless functions, and then I'd say DDoS and DOS kind of goes into that same thing, right? Where we're trying to overwhelm or overutilize to maybe this is more of an attack just because maybe they're just trying to prove something to get a point across. Maybe you're a political organization and they don't like what you stand for, things like that. So those are more geared and I think more focalized for different variations. Sometimes I've seen DDoS or DOS become a uh, kind of a ransomware thing, like, hey, we're attacking you, like, give us the money and we'll stop, kind of thing. Fortunately for cloud, a lot of that you can obfuscate quicker, right? Instead of on-prem with static things, uh, you can move things around a little bit quicker. But again, just got to have mitigation in place for that. So this is kind of what we're seeing going into the next 12 months, maybe. Um, CSPM is on the top, and that differs a little bit from kind of what I was expecting, right? You have the CNAPP, the cloud workload. Certain solutions kind of incorporate all of this, but the cloud security posture management is large because, again, as I mentioned earlier, we as security experts a lot of times put a lot of push and pressure on the people to make sure everything's right. And I'm not going to mention the company name, but there was an incident where in the logs there was a threat that was 100% realized in the software. They had an analyst that was reviewing it. This is public information. And they just missed it, right? It was a breach that came through an OT network, ended up, coming into and exfiltrating a ton of credit card data. But the point is, if you're not watching, right, and double checking those things, again, the security posture management I mentioned earlier, you can take a private storage bucket and make it public, and it's asks you if you're sure and if you have policies in place, and all of a sudden it becomes exposed. So what if that was an HR server, the recipe to Coca-Cola server? I don't know, something that got pushed out that was not supposed to. It will become realized by the public very quickly. Especially if you're a larger company with eyes, very or visible brand, I should say. So cloud budget, though, fortunately, kind of what the report showed is we're seeing an increase, right? Not a lot of decrease, which is good. But I would argue that I don't think I've ever talked to a company, large or small, that said, "Oh, we just have so much money we don't know what to do with," within security budgets. Cloud is still, I hate to say new because that sounds like I'm getting old, but cloud budget is still fairly new. There's still some really large companies that don't segment the cloud budget differently than the IT. It depends on how the company does it. Maybe no wrong way, but I do like it when you work with a company and they have a cloud budget. They have, their IT, their infrastructure budget, and then maybe a security budget. But either way, we have seen that the cloud budgets have increased, and lots of different reasons for that. And with all that amazing news, let's talk a little bit about what we can do to strengthen some of that stuff. So CNAPP, right? That's your cloud security posture management. All the tools kind of rolled into one. There are a lot of really cool solutions out there for this product. CNAPP actually was coined by Gartner. That wasn't a solution. Like firewalls came out. they were dedicated firewalls that were named by the industry, not named by a third-party company, which CNAPP was. So read about it. It's kind of neat. There's some info out there. It kind of talks about how they came up with the CNAPP term. But imagine that as kind of like your superheroes for the cloud, right? It's kind of trying to do all of the things in the cloud, all into one platform, right? Again, I think as somebody that did analyst work for many years, combing through firewall logs, I personally appreciate anything that makes it easier to go through that. And if you can, let's say, pull out some data that's, let's say it has higher scores, higher validated points, different companies do a little different, but let's focus on the things that we know instead of the things that just come up and we think we know because it's just a little line in code, right? I did do really long days of just combing through logs. I do not miss that. So I appreciate some of the solutions that are out today. Um, anything to do with your kind of IM, think of it, the VIP pass, right, to Disney World, so to speak, something like that. We need to make sure, again, that we're not oversubscribing or giving out more credentials, more access with those credentials than what we should, right? Understand what folks need to. And this sounds really silly to say in 2025, but please use MFA, right? Like that is just a common thing that we should all be doing. And as much as you're like, we use that, everybody use that. No, they don't. I'm sorry to say that, but it's unfortunate that a lot of companies are still not using any kind of multi-factor authentication, right? It's just username and password. And I know you probably have a C-level person that doesn't like it. It's a pain in the butt. I get it, but we need to really push on that. WAF or AppSec. So again, the AppSec is really focused on, um, you know, um, APIs, right? So a lot of folks I've heard like, nobody really understands what an API does. Like, I think that's a unfair assessment. I think there's a lot of people that do. So APIs a lot of times don't get secured. I've seen that in multiple cases, and then they kind of freak out, like, oh, somebody found out we have some APIs running into our cloud, and they, were able to breach that data or infiltrate some of the data that was coming through it. So again, WAFs, web application firewalls, also protecting against the things, of those applications that are vulnerable, right? So think about those, just protecting your web traffic effectively, right? Inbound, outbound. We can look at different things, but keeping out the digital invaders, if you will. And then I put this on here, and I think it's almost, I think a lot of people will be like, EPP, really? Like, you really think? So, EPP and like a source solution, right? Putting something on-prem, your EPP is going to be your endpoint protection, right? Have that one last backup, right? If you can, if you have the way to do that, just have that in there. And then for the SOAR type thing, so anything that can do security orchestration, might take a little bit of workload off. And I know some people are terrified of automation because let's just hypothetically say we find a threat in your cloud and you allow your security orchestration tool to then go ahead and put a rule in. Well, good or bad, a threat happened, but maybe it's a realized threat that you're okay with, right? Maybe it's something that and it triggers an operational reaction where it puts a firewall rule in that shuts down access to that said solution, storage, server, whatever. Um, Now you have another issue, right? How much does that server, what's the financial risk on that server? Does it $1 million a minute? Is it something that's not going to be a big deal? Most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the time, those things that get taken offline could be critical, right? And then let's switch to the here, kind of the last slide here. Um, Something else that I think that we, from what I have experienced, we don't do enough of is really looking at tabletop exercises for cloud. I know it's a little bit maybe more in depth because you have so many different aspects to it, but do some threat modeling and incident response, right? So what happens if that server comes offline, right? Let's sit down and do tabletop. I know most of us are virtual, but I really think more of that for cloud, it would be beneficial. There's a few companies that have asked us as a vendor to be involved, which I greatly appreciate. I think it's a great strategy, but I don't see a ton of it. So I would suggest that that may be something if you're looking to maybe increase, cloud security specifically. Um, this is a double-edged sword. So I know I kind of mentioned some of the downsides to security orchestration, but security automation, do some workshops, right? See what those things do. Build out things that can self-heal. So maybe a lot of these functionalities are baked into CSPs, right? So they work with very little effort, but test them out, right? What happens if a server becomes overwhelmed? Do you have a way to redirect that traffic to the new one? Hopefully you do, but test it. Deep dives, get the vendors involved, right? You shouldn't work with any vendor that isn't willing to sit down and talk about the real world implementation of said product, right? So, um, as with many companies, we all have tons of marketing stuff that we could share. But if you really dive into it, like, okay, here's a cool tool, let's see what it does. Well, what would that look like in my environment? And then, GRC, this is the boring side of things for some people, but uh, what I've seen is sometimes we think we understand what the compliance is, only to find out we didn't, right? So we think we're doing a good job and we think things are correct, and then come to find out we didn't stay on top of the new, compliance, governance, things like that that are out. And unfortunately, we're out of compliance, and you don't find that out. Had a customer recently reach out. They were going through some GRC. Then they had a conversation with their insurance company, for cyber insurance, and the cyber insurance company would not secure them. They said we can't offer you a policy. You don't have MFA set up, and you don't have any kind of next generation technology endpoint protection. So of course, you can address all those things, but it's better to be ahead of the game and know what that is before you go to down that path, right? So with that, that's me. Jeremiah. If you interested in connecting on LinkedIn, happy to have another conversation. I hope that somebody gets the gift there. If not, I'm getting old. So thank you so much for your time.